Hi everyone, it's Mark here from Shotkit.com. Today I've got an interview with a famous US wedding photographer named Sam Hurd. He's going to be talking to us about some of his camera gear, some interesting techniques he uses, and some tips for aspiring photographers. So stick around till the end, I think you're going to find it really interesting. If you're a photographer and you'd like to be interviewed on Shotkit, then please get in touch with me via the website shotkit.com. So without further ado, let's go and speak to Sam and see what he has to say.
Well, thanks a lot, Mark. I'm Sam Hurd. I'm primarily a wedding photographer in the Washington, D.C. area. I also have a studio in Baltimore, Maryland. I've been shooting weddings for about 4 years, and I've been shooting professionally about 6 years. And I started with kind of a news, press conference, luncheon type of scene in DC. So.
Okay, great, thanks, Sam. I'm sure a lot of people watching this are quite familiar with your work, in particular the Epic Portrait series that you've done. Yeah, I was pretty impressed when I saw all that. You've obviously shot a lot of famous celebrities. So if you could just talk a bit on how you prepare for those shots, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, I'll start real quick with just the opportunity and how how I was able to meet these people and even photograph them. So like I said, 6 years ago when I started, it was with an organization called the National Press Club. It's like a 100-year-old organization, a journalism club in the heart of Washington, D.C., just a couple blocks from the White House. And when I was hired there, I was hired primarily just to shoot candidates, press conferences, people speaking at a podium, the grip and grins, the real cheesy stuff. But after a few years, I kind of realized that there's actually a lot of downtime behind the scenes with these, VIPs. And typically it was me and their handler or one other person just waiting around in a room, kind of beforehand for 5 or 10 minutes before the big event where they're talking and addressing the press. So, I've kind of developed a pretty good relationship with obviously my bosses and just everybody that works the events at the press club, and decided to pitch the idea of taking that time to take a portrait of this person, kind of a timeless, stoic portrait where it would provide the archives of the press club something different in their historical record. They had only ever had kind of, like I said, the cheesy grip and grins or just a candid shot at the podium. So I thought this would just be a cool, different approach. Since I was the first staff photographer they had, it was a unique opportunity in that I was the first person that had the consistent access and consistent way of shooting and just somebody that they could trust to do something like that. So I started off with kind of a local well-known guy. He owns the hockey team here and a few other sports teams. Really successful guy, and I don't know. I kind of dove into it, thinking if I can do something really crazy and really difficult, then I could probably do anything I wanted with the series. So I photographed him in about 60 seconds, doing a 10-image Brenizer method panorama with studio strobes. So that's flash, 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 flash. I mean, it was crazy. And it ended up turning out great and fine, and it kind of had an interesting look to it. But I realized, they were like, okay, cool, thank you. And after that, I was like, well, I can probably pull off whatever technique or approach I want to do. They're just going to let me do whatever. So it kind of grew from there into just trying and experimenting a bunch of different things. I've always thought of myself as a wedding photographer, so I didn't put a lot of pressure on myself to, think a certain way about studio portrait photography. I just kind of did whatever I wanted, and that's what I kind of continue to do. And I'm also in kind of a unique position with the press club where, I'm just creating a historical record. I'm not under any pressure to develop a certain look. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. As a photographer myself, I appreciate how difficult it is. To do the Brenizer method. I know it's pretty complicated. I know you're just taking a lot of shots around and stitching them together, but it's very hard to get the light right without using strobes. And then on top of that, you're using strobes, and on top of that, you're photographing, one of the most famous actors in Hollywood. So Yeah, like massive respect for trying something so difficult with, you know, someone, you've got, you know, enormous balls, man. That's amazing.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, like I said, I started with the very first time I did it, it was like a 12-shot Brenizer, and I immediately knew, like, okay, well, at least I can do anything I want, but I can't do that every time. So I kind of scaled it back, and most of them are kind of like 3 or 4-shot, just vertical panoramas
Right.
that are a little bit more comfortable to pull off, and still create a really nice shallow depth of field and a different look that beyond anything I'd be able to get with, you know, a standard lens and a 35 millimeter digital SLR. I kind of get a nice shallow depth of field that really would only be possible using a medium format camera of some sort.
Yeah, sure. And I noticed on your blog, I read about how you practice for it, and I saw you've got some kind of rubber mask there that you use to get your lighting right and everything.
It's literally a store like mannequin, and you know, I had a fair amount of time at the press club to do setups and mess around and experiment. Started with just pulling away staff members, you know, to like stand in so I could test certain lights and stuff. But I just realized that wasn't sustainable because people needed to do their jobs, and I figured the next best thing was a mannequin because I could actually see how the light falls on people's faces. And you know, I've bought basically everything Paul C. Buff makes as far as the modifiers go. You know, a beauty dish, a giant parabolic light modifier, an Octabank, strip box, and just all these different things that you can read and research online about how they affect the look and everything. But until you see it and experiment in person and learn about how inch to inch, you know, how it changes on someone's actual face, you really don't know. So the mannequins, you know, were able to stay there for hours and hours. They never got tired, and they never needed, you know, a break.
Yeah, the perfect subjects.
And it just was the best way that I could come up with to experiment and make sure everything's perfect, because most of the time, you know, I'm photographing these people, it is really a one-shot deal. You know, I need to be prepared, and I don't have time to experiment when I'm in it.
Right. Okay, so yeah, so the portrait that you did of George Clooney, like you can see like the kindness in his eyes. You've managed to capture, I think, a lot what I would have thought is his personality. Obviously, I've never met him. I only like from his screen presence. He has that warmth. But yeah, in real life, how was it?
He's awesome. Yeah, one of the benefits of photographing actors is that they tend to know what they look like, and you don't really have to do much to, you know, coax. I basically just had to say what I was going for, and then he did it. You know, it was really nice. But before I photographed him, out there where he was working with an organization to try and kind of raise awareness about something. But he had just gotten off a plane, went straight into the press club's television studios, did like 6 hours straight of interviews with radio and television. I was the very last thing, and I didn't even think I was going to be able to photograph them because they were running late with everything, which often is the case, which is another reason why you really got to be ready and set up for, you know,
sure,
especially high profile people. But he took the time to shake every single person's hand that was working in the studio, all the video people, the interns. I mean, he was just incredibly kind. And he also had like 2 people with him, you know, which is unusual for somebody that well known. Typically they have, you know, a horde of handlers to kind of, you know, play defense for them. So not everybody's trying to, you know, say something to them. But he was really kind and addressed everybody. And he saw what I was doing, and I explained to him what I was going for and what the lights were, you know, why I had them set up the way I did. And he stood in for, I think I took 5 frames with him.
Wow.
And that was it. So.
God, so he is really as friendly as he appears on screen. That's good to know.
Definitely. Yeah. And to be honest, everybody has been. I think part of that might be because they're at the National Press Club, there to be,
sure,
you know, documented by the news, and it's very public. And so.
Yeah, they've got to put on their best face.
Yeah, but he was there in a situation where it was a bit more low-key as far as the crowds and stuff. He was really just doing in-studio interviews, not addressing, you know, a large group of people, but he was still just incredibly nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully, he's been in there. He's been there a few times. only once that I was working. I think he was there a couple of years before that. So I don't. Maybe he'll come back someday, and maybe I'll have another opportunity. But if I do, I'll have to do something totally different
Yeah,
to change it
sure.
up.
So when you first heard that you were going to photograph these celebrities, were you tempted to just go for like a standard lighting setup and run, just the run of the mill, 45 degrees or whatever, just so that because you were so nervous, or did you think straight away, hey, I want to try something different?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of all over the place. My very first thought was to just instantly Google other kind of celebrity portrait type persons and or photographers and see what kind of work was out there. And I came across Dan Winters and obviously Annie Leibovitz and all these
Yeah,
people. And the thing that I realized was, man, how interesting would it be if they had kept a record of some sort of journal or just a blog of what their thoughts were and their entire process from their very first portrait, right when they were learning and starting, all the way up to where they are now. And so that just, gave me the idea to start blogging it and putting what I'd learned out there. And I just figured, I'm definitely going to make mistakes, and that's where you can learn the most and where other photographers, I think, would get the most value reading about. And so I decided I wanted to document everything for that reason and put it on my blog. And then to make it interesting, I just immediately strayed toward doing something a little bit different with the light, even if it's straightforward lighting, but using a technique like free lensing to change up the plane of focus, or if it's really straightforward equipment and kind of inverting the light so that you have a really harsh light, like I did with Clooney's picture.
sure.
It's kind of the opposite what you would think of, and he was a little confused by it at first. I had this giant, nice modifier kind of behind him,
Yeah,
or a little bit to the side of him, and then a really harsh kind of pinpoint light on his face. But anyway, it's all about experimenting, and the easiest way you can differentiate yourself and your work is to do something that nobody else is doing.
yeah,
It's the exact opposite.
for
Even if
sure.
it makes no sense, hopefully it'll turn out and it'll differentiate you in some way. So,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's such a competitive industry. In Sydney, I'm sure it is in America, like times 10. You got to differentiate your work, and that's why I have a lot of respect for you. You're always pushing the boundaries with your wedding photography, and on top of that, you're very open about it, and you blog about it. It's not like you're trying to hide it. You're sharing it with everyone. I think you're one of the few people that actually do that. So. Just moving on to that, like you mentioned your free lensing there. I think you do prisming and all these things that I'm not sure if you pioneered by any means, but like I said, you're open about talking about how you use that in everyday work. So could you just
yeah.
select a couple of those for me and just, I know I don't want a whole rundown on how to do it, but just why you use the technique maybe?
Yeah, well, I mean, in general, shooting weddings, you tend to be in a lot of situations that aren't the most ideal, or in DC, in a lot of environments that aren't visually that inspiring, at least for me. We don't have like really amazing landscape or really interesting architecture beyond kind of the monuments. So over the years, I just found myself more and more in situations where I was just desperate and really wanted to make an interesting photo in the hallway of a boring hotel room because we don't have time to go to the planned location in a nice park,
Right.
or in the reception lobby before the bride and groom are getting to be announced because things are running late. And I just found that certain tools like or free lensing, which is just the technique of free lensing is just taking your lens off of your camera and floating it in front of the sensor by hand and then kind of angling it to change the focal plane, which creates just really interesting distortion effects. And it's like basically with those two techniques, what I liked about them was that you're basically using the environment that you're in to create a more interesting photo. You're not compositing in other elements that weren't actually there. You're not really photoshopping anything additional. It's all done in camera, and it's all kind of impacted by the environment that you're in, but you're seeing it in a very interesting way. So those techniques kind of appealed to me for that reason. And I didn't really invent them. I'm sure people have been shooting with all sorts of things to create different distortions and artifacts in their cameras forever. But the other thing I really like about them is that it's not something that you see as much in digital cameras these days. I think people did things like that a little bit more in the film days, you know, when you had things like light leaks and stuff that would even occur naturally with film bodies. You just don't get those anymore with digital cameras because everything's so perfect.
Sure.
So it just kind of brings a little bit of that organic look back into photos a little bit, which I think is cool for such a digital time for everybody to be in.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I've forgotten the question as well, but no. So I sent you a photo over. Just I was hoping that you'd be able to discuss it, like about at the start of the week. I don't know if you remember. It's the one where you've got the wedding couple in the middle, and it's this incredible sky at the background, and the night sky with the stars in it. I'll put it on the screen anyway for everyone watching. If you could, yeah. First of all, did the sky really look like that? I've never seen anything. This is amazing.
Well, this is an example of just being aware of your surroundings and taking advantage of it. That was in Costa Rica, in a really kind of small surf town called Nosara, in like the northwestern shore of Costa Rica, and it was so underdeveloped and just untouched that there was virtually no light pollution from a surrounding city or anything. It was, when it was dark, it was truly dark, and the stars just, it happened to also be a very clear night, thankfully. There were no clouds, and the stars were just incredible. It looked pretty much like that.
Oh, wow.
In fact, I did a few more. That was a 15-second exposure photo. I did a few longer exposures, like 30 seconds and a minute and a half, and you could see the Milky Way.
Wow.
And the entire galaxy when you really emphasize the light. But that was just a 15-second exposure, and the way I lit that was by having the bride and groom stand a good, that was with a 24mm lens, so they were a little bit of a distance away. I don't remember how far, but a good distance. So any slight movements they may have had during the exposure wouldn't be perceivable because it's 24mm and probably 30 feet away from me.
Sure.
I basically put the camera literally on the ground in the sand, and essentially all I did to light them, for the, you know, I hit the shutter. For the first 3 or 4 seconds of the exposure, I just kind of paint with a small video light, kind of sweeping up and down like this to create the illusion of a, not an illusion, it just creates the look of a larger light source, like a softbox. If I just held the video light static, it would have been, you know, just a small, a little bit more harsh. So if you just sweep it for about 3 or 4 seconds, and it lights them nicely, and then I just put the light down, and the rest of the exposure was just sucking in the starlight to really bring them out. And that's it. That's all it was to light them. I know a lot of photographers will just use a strobe and things like that and just burst a flash on the couple or whatever they're lighting. And that works really well because it freezes your subject. But, you know, then you're talking about a light source this big, and it's much more harsh and a lot less flattering. And it's really hard to see what you're doing with a video light. Even if you're not light painting, even if you're lighting something like details or just a straightforward portrait at night or something, you see what you're doing before you're doing it, you know, before you're taking the photo. So
right.
It's a much faster way to work. And I just use a light panels. I think it's called the Chroma,
Sure.
CROMA. And it's awesome because it takes AA batteries, and it will recharge the batteries inside it with an adapter if you need. And you can adjust the light temperature from daylight to tungsten using a knob. So it's pretty cool. You don't have to gel it or anything like that.
Yeah, right. Okay, cool. So you say that the exposure is roughly 15 seconds, then you're light painting them for about 3 seconds at the start of the exposure, and then for that remaining 10, 12 seconds, do you tell the couples to remain very still, or I suppose it doesn't matter really, does it?
Yeah, depends on how much time I know I have with them. If I know it's kind of a one-shot deal, then I'll say, yeah, go ahead and go. Usually I'll try it twice just to be sure.
Yeah.
Make sure nobody was blinking too long or anything weird. And yeah, I mean, you can, as long as they aren't, I tell them, as long as the light's not on you, you can move however you like.
Okay, so it's just that initial 3 seconds that's actually registering the exposure, and then the rest is just capturing the ambient light.
Yep, exactly. So it depends. You need to be in a dark situation to be able to pull it off. If there's too much ambient light from like street lights or something like that, it's really not going to work well, and you're more likely to get blur or other weird artifacts. So you just want to be in a situation where you're in a dark ambient situation, and you should be good to go from there. That makes sense.
Yeah, sure. And just touch a little bit about your post-processing, maybe not on that image because it doesn't look like there's actually that much done to it, but just for, in general, just what's your style, what, plugins, whatever you use.
Yeah, so I don't use anything store-bought or purchased. I've tried the Visco stuff, but just found that literally everybody was going the Visco route, and just yet another way to differentiate, do something that no one else is doing, don't use what everybody else is using.
Sure.
I just have a preset that I use that I've kind of just taken note of what I tended to change time after time, every time, from image to image. And if it was something that I found changing every time, I would just add it to my preset and build from there. So I constantly was boosting my exposure like one stop with every frame, because with the Nikon D4 camera, most of the dynamic range is captured in the shadow detail. You can pull back shadows like crazy in the D4, but you can't pull back highlights. If you blow your highlights, they're gone.
Yeah.
But the shadows you can really pull back. So I tended to underexpose a lot. So my preset on import automatically boosts it by a stop, because I just know to underexpose in the camera. And then it pulls the highlights back a little bit, because I would find myself doing that every image. And so I just kind of built this preset over time that would take care of the mundane stuff. Even if it doesn't look right on the picture and the environment that it's in, I still apply that preset, and I never see how it looks out of camera with nothing on it. I just found I would second guess myself too much. Sure. If I saw the original image and then would apply a preset, I would say, maybe that's too much, that looks too weird. But if I just started editing from my preset and kind of go from there as a baseline, I've made decisions much faster, and I'm ultimately happy with the way all my stuff looks. So it's working for me.
Yeah, I think so is everyone else.
I do everything in Lightroom. Occasionally I'll pull images into Alien Skin's Exposure 5 plugin. Alien Skin is the company, Exposure is the product name, and I really like their grain controls, because you can separate the highlight and the midtone and the shadow grain amounts, which you can't do in Lightroom. So occasionally I'll run it through there for that, but pretty much always in Lightroom for the most part, which is great, because then I'm not bouncing back and forth, and I can keep everything organized, and I'm not dealing with external files and all that kind of stuff. Believe me, I've tried doing that, and I tried editing my favorite photos in Photoshop using TRA and stuff way back in the day. Just random plugins all over the place, and just found that if nothing else, it was really hard for me to stay organized doing that, and keeping it in Lightroom has been really helpful. So
yeah, definitely. Photoshop's such a not a time waster, but it just zaps your time completely when you're trying to work on an image. I know I know a few wedding photographers who say they use Photoshop in every image, and I'm just thinking, oh my god, you must have very little life. Your images look amazing, but
well, the only other part that I use Photoshop for is I use it to batch sharpen images that I send to clients in a USB key.
Okay.
But that's just a simple batch command that just runs the Photoshop unsharp mask across everything. It's nothing fancy at all. It doesn't actually change the tonal qualities of the photos at all.
Sure.
So.
Okay. Oh, you mentioned that USB key actually. I saw on your blog post, maybe in the corner of your room, or on the shelf there. Was that what they were? Those multi-color. You got like red, yellow, blue, and stuff. Yeah. Have you got one lying around? You could just maybe show, or is it?
Yeah. Let me grab it. I think it's right over here.
Thanks.
So this is kind of another example of just having a random kind of opportunity and seeing if I could seize the opportunity. This is a case designed by the company is called Made by Monolith, and actually what they do is make iPhone like backings. I don't have one on this, but I had an older version iPhone, and I saw that these guys sold like wood back plates for your iPhone. You could swap out the glass and put on wood. It's like, that's cool. So I ordered one, and it came in a box that was really cool. Just the packaging that it came in was awesome. So I was like, I'll just take a chance. It's probably a big company that won't ever reply to an email or whatever. But I emailed their support and I just said, hey, I really like your packaging. Can you let me know who designed it for you? And turns out the whole company is just this one guy in Texas, here in the States, and he custom makes everything. And he agreed to just take on this project, and we did 4 different colors.
Cool.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be cool to kind of be able to pick a color that is sort of prevalent in their wedding day. A lot of people have wedding colors, or if it's an outdoor wedding in a really green environment, I'll usually send it in green, whatever. And then it holds, like an open one, just slides out here. For some reason, it's not sliding. Come on. There we go. And holds a USB key. Which,
oh, wow, that's awesome. So that's all in cardboard then?
Yeah, it's all cardboard, exactly.
Yeah.
And so here's one with a USB key in it.
Oh, yeah,
and
that looks great.
I just sent him the specs of the USB key is made somewhere else.
Yeah.
There's tons of places you can get these done across the internet, but I just sent him the specs for this, and he just made a nice little groove, and it's just corrugated cardboard, so it's really cheap. And he just cut it to size, and then this is printed separately. Yeah. And it has my little logo there. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Yeah, really nice.
Thanks. I was just about kind of really being inspired by the work they'd done somewhere else and taking a chance to see if they would do something for me. It was really kind of lucky. And I'm actually trying to have them do some more larger packaging for me for my albums and stuff like that, so I can send them in something that is the same style as this. So,
yeah, cool. Nice and light for postage as well.
Yeah, and it makes a huge difference having professional packaging. When I first started, I used to only mail DVDs, and then I quickly kind of went into the wood sliding box thing that a lot of people are doing now. I got that idea. I just saw some other photographers saying, I was like, that looks professional enough. I'm going to do that. I found where they ordered them and ordered a bunch of these nice big boxes. But eventually, it was just about trying to do something that was unique for me.
Sure.
But when you're first starting out, I think it's more helpful to just have something that looks professional. It'd be great if it ties into your branding, but if it doesn't, the thing that you deliver your photos in at the end of the day is probably the last thing you need to think about when you're running a business. Not the last, but it's not something you need to prioritize right off the bat.
Yeah.
You really need to prioritize your skills as a photographer and a business person before worrying about packaging. But
yeah, that's really good advice. I know, as creatives, that you often hone in on one tiny little thing. Maybe it's your logo or it's your packaging, like you say. And at the end of the day, the bride doesn't give two hoots about that. Well, they might do if they're very design conscious, but like you said, we tend to get caught up in those small things and forget the big picture, which is literally photography. And yeah, so
yeah. And it's not a bad thing to worry about your brand,
sure,
your logo, and stuff like that. It's just that I seem to see a lot of photographers doing that from the very start. I've got a camera, I need to make an amazing website that's totally custom with a custom logo and all this, but that all isn't going to hold up too well if your pictures aren't where they need to be yet.
Yeah.
I was shooting weddings 3.5 years. I've only had these for, I guess I've had them for about a year.
Yeah.
It was about 3 years before I, had this, and hopefully I can keep these for a while now. I'm pretty happy with them. But anyway,
Yeah. All right, great. So you mentioned the D4 earlier on. You're obviously a Nikon shooter, and that's really refreshing for me because there's so many wedding photographers, as they're using the Canons, they're using all the fancy primes and everything. Have you been tempted by the 1.2s and all that, or are you quite happy where
Definitely.
you are?
I majored in computer science in college, so I am a gear nut. I love the technology of photography and the evolution that cameras are going through now is pretty amazing. How you can just, the sensors are more sensitive than the human eye at this point. So I've tried anything and everything. I purchased an entire Canon system.
Oh, right.
I purchased the entire Mark II with a 51.2 and a 24.14, and that was a couple years ago. Tried it. Ended up returning it after a couple months, or I guess I resold that.
Why was that?
When was that?
Why? Why did you return the whole thing?
Why? Just to see what, why the majority of people were using Canon,
Yeah.
It is definitely true. Most wedding photographers, I think most photographers across the board are using Canon.
Yeah.
And, Canon does have, their lenses do have a nice look to them and a nice kind of color rendering and a really beautiful bokeh and feel about them. But none of that matters if your photos aren't in focus. And I don't care what anybody says. Nikon cameras focus better. All of them do. Well, I don't know all of them. I haven't used the lower end Nikon.
Sure.
Before, all their pro to semi-pro bodies focus incredibly well. And that's the most important thing to me at the end of the day, is having an image that's in focus. And on top of that, the low light abilities of the Nikon cameras are far better than what I found in Canon. Anyway, and I did try the Mark III when that came out as well. I repurchased, the whole kit again just to try it, just to see, and give it a shot. I'm very lucky to have the ability to do that and kind of, test cameras that would be very expensive for some people. I also try, I own the Leica M.
Yeah.
And a very expensive lens that comes with that, a 50.95 lens.
Yeah.
But anyway, I have been tempted, and I have tried, everything that I thought might work better for some reason. At the end of the day, I've always come back to Nikon. Just, I'm familiar with it for one, which is really nice, and two, it just consistently delivers the most keepers for me. And I've never had any issue editing Nikon files. I don't do anything crazy to compensate for greens or reds or whatever people have an issue with Nikon.
Sure.
And to be honest, even when I get second shooters that shoot with a different camera style, which is a lot of times a Canon body, I still edit my files exactly the same. And everything looks fine and consistent to me. There's some slight variations, but it's nothing that's like, whoa, this is totally a Canon camera now. It's not that big of a deal. For me, like I said, at the end of the day, it's the focus, and Nikon consistently wins for me. So
yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because as photographers, we've always got this gear envy, and we like to see what other people are using, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to create Shotkit, because we like looking at other people's stuff and maybe showing off our own stuff. But it's very interesting to hear that you've actually been there and you've got all the best of the best Canon, you've given it a go, and you're like, no, that's not for me because of these solid reasons. It's not like airy-fairy stuff. It's actually, you prefer the focusing on the Nikon system, and so you're quite happy. You probably don't get that niggling feeling, oh, I'm missing out on something, I've got to try this other camera.
So yeah, I really don't, especially, well, at least with the SLRs. And my girlfriend Nessa is also a wedding photographer. She shoots with the Canon Mark III. So now, because I'm dating her, I have access to that at any time I could possibly want. and I never never use it. I just never have seen the advantage, to be honest. But
okay.
I will say, the recent release of Sony's A7 cameras threw me for a loop. I do a lot of gear reviews on my website, and that was one of the ones I wanted to review really quickly, because I was really excited about it, and I typically only finish and write and post reviews with gear that I love.
Yeah.
The A7 I still haven't posted a review for, because when I bought it, I was very excited, and I actually sold my Leica M camera the day I got it.
Wow.
The A7, because you can mount Leica lenses on the A7. I was like, you know what? This is way more megapixels. The ISO is better. I'm selling my Leica M because it's a $7,000 body, and the Sony one is a $2,000 body. And then 2 weeks later, I immediately regretted it, and I have been lusting for my Leica ever since. The A7 is a great camera, and I still have it, but the colors and the shallow depth of field that it renders isn't even close to what the Leica M looks like. The files are cleaner, but the color is different, and the bokeh is not as good. It's not as shallow in the depth of field. So I will definitely be repurchasing a Leica camera. I'm going to just eventually have to let the Sony A7, I have the A7R. I'm going to have to let that go. I do love it for its electronic viewfinder. It is amazing for that, especially with Leica lenses that you manually focus. It's really incredible for that. But and in general, it's just kind of an uninspiring camera. It's the design of it just doesn't have much personality to it. The shutter is really loud. I just never have the itch to go pick it up and take a photo.
Right.
And even if functionally it's a somewhat better camera, the end results and just the inspiration isn't there like it is with a Leica. So I do envy again now for a Leica camera, but I'll wait a little while. They have I think an announcement coming out soon for a new body. Hopefully it's a full frame sensor body, but we'll see what happens. I still have all my Leica lenses.
Right.
But,
gosh, you must be so active on eBay or Craigslist or whatever you guys use over there, like buying and selling.
Yeah. There's a website. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's like Fred Miranda or FM.
Yeah, I know the one.
Forums. Yeah. I've done some buying and selling on that, but I know a lot of local photographers, so I'll typically do trades or whatever that way.
Okay.
So I'm not hit with the fees and stuff.
Yeah, right. So just talking about how you shoot a wedding, I saw like on your blog you've got a photo of you with just one body on your shoulder. You've got your D4 and you've got a lens on it, and you've got your little backpack there. So am I right in thinking you don't shoot with two bodies and two lenses at the same time?
It depends. So recently I bought a second D4 just to have a solid backup camera, and because I kind of sold off my D800 and other things, I wanted a second D4 just to be totally prepared. And I have started using that more for essentially just the ceremony when people are walking down the aisle, just so I can get a nice tight shot and then a nice wide shot. Oops, lights turned off. But that is essentially the only time of the day that I use a second body. The thing I like about using one body and kind of one lens at a time is that it really forces you to focus on your environment and what's around you and the moments that are happening, and not so much like, okay, what lens can I pull out of my bag to make this an interesting photo? It's what lens do I have on me, or, I do carry a few lenses in my bag. I usually carry 2 extras just in case.
Yeah.
But it just forces me to think a lot more about my environment and anticipating, moments that are about to happen and things like that, instead of just being distracted by carrying gear and all that. I can't stand having to roll a bag around or carry an extra bag on my shoulder, or, if you've got 2 cameras on you, clanking lenses against tables, or, you're just not as agile, especially in a lot of wedding situations, at least when people are getting ready and stuff like that. You're usually, the getting ready time of the day is the first part of the day where you're really setting the tone for how you are as a photographer, what your approach is. If you're running around a really dense, crowded hotel room with 2 cameras and a long lens sticking out, you're just not very agile. So having it really simple has just worked really well for me, and that's basically my theory behind it. So far.
Sure.
But I do sometimes just, I shoot almost 50 weddings a year. I think this 2013 I did 45.
Wow.
So occasionally I will throw in another lens, something different, just to change it up for myself, make life interesting, and shoot all getting ready photos with a tilt shift instead of my 58 or something like that, just to make it interesting. Now I know I can get good exposure and I can get good expressions and everything. So beyond that, you can just change it up with the equipment that you use.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so your lens choice is predominantly wide angles. So you've got the 24-1.4. I think you said you had it's not a wide angle, but you've got a 50, the broken one that you use for your, what's it called, the free lensing. And then you've recently bought a 58-1.4, which I saw your review about, and I love that photo of the bride where you've got the water in the background. It's unbelievable. So maybe I've missed one there. You've got a tilt shift as well, right?
Yeah, 45.
45, yeah. So nothing longer than a 58. Can you just talk us through why you don't feel that?
I do own an 85 and a 135.
Okay.
I mean, I own virtually every lens.
I can imagine.
I also own a 14-24 and a 70
okay.
200 and a 24-70. I own everything.
Holy crap! You got everything.
But it's taken a long time to accumulate this much equipment, of course. But But the ones 95% of the time that I shoot with, they are the 24 or now the 58. It used to be the Sigma 50-1.4, which I have right here, actually.
Sure.
But I found the Nikon 58-1.4 that was just released a few months ago has a much nicer kind of 3D quality to the bokeh, and it's I get a more consistent focus with it than the Sigma. But I still highly recommend the Sigma, especially since it's only $500.
Right.
And the Nikon 58 is like $1,700 or something. It's crazy. It's not worth the money, but they also, I don't think, are marketing it towards, amateurs. If you're a professional and something you use every day, it pays for itself very quickly. So for the most part, yeah, the 58 is all I need. But if I'm ever in a situation where I'm restricted because of a ceremony, church rule or something, I always have the 135 to kind of, or the 85 to give me a little reach if I absolutely have to. And there's nothing wrong with those lenses. I just find that when I've been reviewing photos that I've taken with those, I just feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect.
Sure.
They have a great look, but it really feels to me like it's a photo taken from a distance. You have a much more apparent impression of it's the background because it's a telephoto lens. The 58 feels like you're right there in it.
Yeah.
And the 24 really feels like that. I mean, the 24, I use it mostly for kind of nice scenic kind of environmental portraits, and then just getting right in close because it really makes it feel engaging and gives photos a little bit of almost movement in a way that longer lenses just don't do.
Okay, right.
Yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
People tend to go one way or the other with a 24 and a 50,
Sure.
or a 35 and an 85. And for me, and how comfortable I am getting close to people or not getting close to people and just interacting on the day, the 24 and the 50 work the best for me. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. Like you said, you've got the whole arsenal of the Nikon range, and you've just chosen those 2 or 3 that you feel comfortable with. Like you said, you're thinking about the picture rather than what lens you're going to take. I think it's a very efficient workflow. Earlier on, you mentioned that light panels chroma, the thing that you use to paint do light painting with. Do you actually use that as a replacement for a strobe, or like for the dance floor shots, or are you actually still using the flashes?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes I still use a strobe. If I do use a strobe, I have a Nikon SB900. Actually, it's an SB910.
Yeah.
And if I do use that, I use typically the bounce flash technique with one light on my camera body bouncing the light behind me. I don't set up lights on stands. I don't, remotely trigger anything. But typically the light panel is really helpful if you, give it to a second shooter or something like that. And, during dancing and stuff like that, I can get kind of cool side light and things like that. But to be honest, typically if it's a reception that's in a dark kind of room with no ambient light, I'll use a strobe still.
Okay.
But that's usually kind of my last resort. DC has a large range of venue types. Half of them are in hotels with conference rooms and reception rooms, and then the other half are outdoors under, in beautiful vineyards, in Virginia. And it just depends on the environment. But typically I try and go with the ambient light as much as possible. It's just the truest representation of what it's like for is that are, too insane to the point where people don't even, it doesn't look like the place that their wedding was, I find it's with dancing and reception, when you have all these triggered lights from stands or, 3 or 4 strobes, it doesn't even look like the place that it was. It's nothing like they remember in their minds. And I don't know, that I try not to do too much of that kind of stuff. So
yeah, right.
That makes sense.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right, so yeah, that's pretty much it for all the gear questions. Like as I said at the start of the interview, I admire how open you are with everything, your gear, your processing, or your techniques, even things that a lot of wedding photographers try and keep close to their hearts because they don't want to be copied. But you're very open and you're out there, and yeah, I really admire that. I've only got one last question for you. It's quite a broad one, but I'm sure a lot of people out there are going to be watching and they're going to be like, I want to take photos like Sam. Maybe they're up and coming wedding photographers or just people who are interested in how you achieve your photos and everything. But just in general, what tips do you have for aspiring photographers?
Yeah, that's a good one. Really, I think there are a few things that kind of really propelled me the fastest. Kind of two realizations. One is to just shoot as much as you possibly can, every moment that you can. For me, I oftentimes get tired of shooting, but that's when I know I will probably grow the most, when I just force myself to go out there and see something differently. The moment that you start getting bored of the situation, I always tell myself, there's something else here. There's got to be. There's another photographer will come in here and shoot this totally differently than I would. How might they do that? And then I just push myself. That's going to answer, over time. It takes time, unfortunately, but shooting as much as you can is going to answer, so many questions for you. The fastest, or not fastest, but in a really meaningful, kind of deep way. The other thing that I think really helps is to just kind of cut out a lot of the following 40 different photographers and checking their blogs, every other day. I know, I still have photographers that I look up to and I follow their work consistently, but it's like two now.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Who are those photographers?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So Ryan Brenizer.
Sure.
He's a New York City photographer. He's actually the photographer that inspired me to start shooting weddings, and I consider him a close friend now. I've shot with him a few times, and he introduced me to my girlfriend Nessa.
Oh wow!
I'm very close with him, and I think he's the one that really taught me that things you learn along the way are really important to share with other photographers. It's important to put your secrets out there, because if you I think you literally said this, if you base your business on secrets, then it doesn't take much for a photographer to eventually learn that secret and then undercut you.
Sure.
They'll start doing that exact same thing, and then you won't have much else going for you. So it is really important to put it out there, and I got that from Ryan. The other photographer is Jeff Newsom. He was one of the photographers early on I started following. He's out in California.
Yeah, incredible light painting photos.
He's awesome. He's really innovative in a lot of the things he does, primarily with light. I don't know that he uses a lot of quirky equipment things. His light painting is amazing, and he just never ceases to blow me away with just an image I've never seen before. So those are the two I consistently follow. I occasionally pop in and see other, but following people that aren't wedding photographers can be really cool. Matt Stewart is a really well-known street photographer. Just his images blow me away, and just things outside of that, wedding photographer kind of way of thinking that a lot of people get sucked into can be really helpful, just to give you a little bit of perspective. And there's a lot more out there than just the wedding scene, for sure. So that's another reason I still maintain shooting at the press club. It's still a lot of boring press conferences, things like that, but it gives me a mental break from weddings and kind of resets my batteries. I really encourage people to shoot, just plain landscapes or just, architecture. It might seem kind of boring, but it gives you a mental break from the wedding work. So.
Okay. Yeah, great. That's some awesome tips. Yeah, great tips. And thanks so much, Sam, for your time today. It's been really interesting for me. It's been so interesting because I'm a photographer as well, but I'm sure everyone watching, they're going to be so happy that you've shared so much, and just appreciate your time. So thanks very much, and I hope to speak to you sometime again.
Okay, take care, man.
Cheers.
Have a good day.